Hello, hello. For those of you tuning in, my name is Yorona Boster, and I am a certified speaker and communications coach, a life coach, a international speaker, author, and podcaster. I live, breathe, and function at the intersection of communication and healthy, balanced leadership. I love helping people communicate with purpose and integrity with not just everybody around them, but with themselves most of all. Before I have our lovely guest today introduce himself, I just have a request for anyone watching or listening. As this series continues, I would love your input on communication topics that interest you. Communication runs very deep. In fact, in my opinion, it's a lot deeper than we tend to think on a surface level. So I would like to ask you not to be afraid to stretch the limits of where and how communication shapes your life. And DM those ideas to me. Drop them in the comments or even email them to me at yoronaboster.com. All right, Dr. Post, or Stephen, please, would you tell our audience a bit about yourself before we jump into our conversation?
Well, if you look at the wall behind me, I'm in an office. That doesn't communicate too much. But I'm in the medical school at Stony Brook University in New York, where I'm a professor and director and founder of the Center for Medical Humanities, Compassionate Care, and Bioethics. So we're very interested in communication and teaching medical students the art of empathic and compassionate communication. We do a whole lot of different things, and we're pretty successful at it. So I think it's a great place to be. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not a physician. I'm a PhD from the University of Chicago in world religions and psychology. So I worked a lot with Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi, who wrote the book Flow, which became quite well known, and he's now passed away. But that's my generation and that's my era. And so here I am. I have a very nice opportunity here to make people's lives flourish, and we do that effectively.
Yes, and you've done that through many different avenues too, in case anybody wants to check out Stephen's TEDx talk. I think you have one or do you have two? I
think I have one, but I also, so I also run an institute.
Yes.
Compliments of Sir John Marks Templeton, the great investor who passed away in 2008. We were very close. And he once sent me a fax, and he said, "Stephen, we need to study the greatest human strength that may even be beyond human strength. It may be inspired in certain ways." And I faxed back, "Sir John, what should we call it?" And he said, "Let's call it the Institute for Research on Pure Unlimited Love." At the time, I was at the Case Western Medical School studying Alzheimer's and susceptibility genes. And we were close, and I understood how mystical he was. He was called the Tennessee Mystic, by the way, informally by those who knew him. But he loved these interfaces between science and spirituality. So what I did was I faxed back. I said, "Sir John, maybe we should call the Institute for the Study of Creative Altruism. Language matters. That's a little more science-y and a little less challenging for people who don't buy into these kinds of things." But he faxed back, "No, Stephen, I think the Institute for Research on Pure Unlimited Love, up to $8.9 million. And I faxed back, because my communication skills were so good, "Sir John, I love that language. It jumps right off the page."
Good stuff. Yep. That 8 point with a dollar marker on it, I guess that will do, right? Language then.
25 years ago.
Yeah.
And we funded so many great programs and studies. Yeah. Supported so many wonderful people who've done so many great things.
Yeah.
I don't regret a moment of it. Although I took a little flack from my less empathic colleagues What kind of love are we talking about? That was
Right. That's a good question. And that actually brings me to our question, which is because of all the work you've done in what you've now categorized as pure, unselfish, unadulterated love.
unlimited.
Unlimited. I'm curious about when you're looking at the world right now and the way we're currently relating to one another. What is it that you see as the most important doorway back into that kind of love, to integrate that kind of love into our everyday lives?
Well, we're not talking about the love of chocolate or the love of designer jeans, although they're fine with me. I actually don't eat much chocolate. But definitions of love, which are very clearly stated, you have to be definitional in this field. When the security and the well-being of another is as real or meaningful to you as your own, and sometimes even more so, you love that person. So that's the human spectrum of love. But then what is pure unlimited love? That gets a little more metaphysical.
Mm. Okay.
So is my
Yeah.
colleague here, Jeffrey Trilling, longtime chair of the Department of Family Medicine, said when I asked him, Jeff, what is pure unlimited love? He's a bit of a mystic. I thought he would get it very close. He said, after pausing, thinking for a bit, he said, pure unlimited love is the very first thing that you see when you close your eyes for the last time, comma, hopefully. Let me do that again. Pure unlimited love is the very first thing that you see when you close your eyes for the last time, hopefully, which sort of conjures up ideas of ultimate reality,
Right. Right.
the sort of mystical qualities that are not really captured in a definition that's based entirely on human interactions.
Right. So that makes it really difficult to conceptualize for a lot of people. So what I would love to do is try to conceptualize this in a tangible way that people can actually implement into their daily lives, because I think we're having more difficulty with that these days. People are struggling to relate to one another. People are struggling to connect to one another. We're having a loneliness epidemic. We're struggling with that real connection that comes, and I think love is a big part of the quantity, the quality of the way we connect with other people.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
So the way I describe this, I have love, as I defined it just now, at the center of a wheel.
Okay.
It's the hub. But interestingly enough, I come to this job. I've been working in medical schools for 45 years, Chicago, Case Western, Ann Arbor, and Stony Brook. I come to my job with an intentionality of being loving in my interactions with the people I encounter. But I don't run around the hallways spewing the language of love, because it would be confusing and it could even get me in trouble.
Yeah, there's a possibility of that.
Yeah, remote, but possible. So most of my work and most of this book, Pure Unlimited Love, is about the manifestations of love in everyday life, which people can relate to concretely. That is to say, at that level, they're very useful. For example, for leadership, what are the 10 manifestations of love that I think are very vital in everyday living? Certainly compassion. If someone comes in and they say that their adolescent child has relapsed into addiction, they need some compassion. They need listening, that's another part of it. The
Yes.
patients all need and want compassion, which is not empathy. Empathy is simply understanding the emotional situation
Right.
of another, but compassion is understanding and feeling that emotional situation in the context specifically of suffering. And it includes, as the Dalai Lama would say, who wrote the foreword to this book, uh, it includes an intention and a readiness to alleviate the source of that suffering. So, empathy means I understand your emotional state. Compassion means I understand that state with some affect, and I'm ready to try to do my best to get you through it and to alleviate.
So, would you say, in effect, compassion holds support inside of it? Because, like,
Sure.
the desire to want to help, to support, to help that person in some way, some measure or
Yeah.
another,
Yeah.
whatever that looks like for them.
Yeah. The Dalai Lama, by the way, who I know reasonably well, is quite critical about American use of
Ah,
the term compassion because
mhm.
it turns out that so often it's really just appealing to a very comfortable internal emotional state. It's virtuous for me to feel compassion and to
Ah,
articulate that. But that's not what it's about. In the end, for him, compassion is an action, an activity of alleviation. Now, even if you can't find out how to alleviate a person's suffering, or if it's beyond your wherewithal, you can
mhm.
still have that intentionality. Because without that
Mm.
intentionality, it's not truly compassion.
Okay, so I want to talk about intentionality because I think for me, and I'm going to challenge this with intentionality, you can have the greatest of intentions, and people often intend to be loving, but their communication signals something entirely different. Sometimes they're even though their intention is to be loving, their communication signals urgency or fear or defensiveness or overwhelm. And so what I worry about is the gap between intention and impact. Where where most of the time, where most of our relational pain tends to live.
You know,
Because to me, closing that gap is an act of love. And
sure.
that's why I work in the world of communication, because I try to get people to understand you can have the best of intentions, but if you can't communicate that effectively,
Mhm.
then another person is going to receive what they're going to receive. And usually it's based off of previous experiences, knowledge, and so on. And they are not always going to receive it the way you intended. So
You're
that's
very right. You're very right about that. And of course, compassion is not the whole of love, it's just one out of 10. I also talk a lot about carefrontation, a word that was invented by one of my mentors, M. Scott Peck, who wrote a book called The Road Less Traveled.
yes.
And he has a lot about carefrontation in there. And he once wrote me a long letter saying, Stephen, you talk a lot about love, but what about a love that has to challenge people to remain true to their convictions and to who they are and their integrity and their identity? So he said, you can use my word, carefrontation, not confrontation and not tough love, but carefrontation. And I think that's a lot of what communication is about
Hmm.
because it's not always going to be simple and easy and everything's going smoothly.
Yeah.
In fact, he was a psychiatrist. He'd gone to Case Western for medical school, and I was on the faculty there. So that's how we connected. And he's passed away now. But, Scotty was a great guy, and he was a very good communicator. And he was focused on helping people through your communicative skill set to change their behaviors, to prevent various decisions that would be unhealthy. And
Hmm.
I'm in a department of family, population, and preventive medicine. And prevention takes tremendous communicative skill.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. I come from that world of the public health arena where we think about the intention, the what prevention actually means, because prevention gives us that opportunity to not have to deal with the problems downscale.
Yeah, so good point. I mean, so William Miller, who wrote the best book ever, he was at the University of Arizona on communication in the context of helping people to avoid the worst case scenario. He said, you cannot tell them what to do. You have to ask them respectfully and with their autonomy front and center. Identify your difficulty and let them talk about that. Don't interrupt them. And then ask them, do you want to change? And if they don't want to change, there's not much you're going to do, at least not on that day.
Right.
If they do want to change, and sometimes they do, you want to ask them, so what would your approach to change be? You want to elicit from them.
Right.
And then after they've spoken for a while and you've batted this around in a cordial fashion and in a non-judgmental fashion, then you can ask them, okay, so this is what you want to do to try to improve your behavior or your feelings or your speech or whatever it might be. Write it down.
Mm.
Write it down on a piece of paper. And that is a big part of preventive medicine. When you get people to that stage of actually articulating their intention.
Yeah.
And then well, so why don't you come back in a few weeks and let's see how you did.
I think a big part of that is shaping their autonomous control. You have a choice over your plan. For you, we don't have. There are places and spaces in our lives where autonomy is somewhat restrictive, and it sounds like, to the best of like the way I see it, it sounds like a coaching philosophy, which is that we get the person to decide for themselves, not just where they are, but where they want to be,
Right.
and then what it's going to take for them to get there.
Yeah, so that's carefrontation.
Yeah, yeah. So that's beautiful.
Confrontation is a bad word.
Mm.
And so I actually do lectures on carefrontation.
So it's interesting that you say that, because one of the things that I think about when I think about pure love is the recognition that it is not all easy, light, happiness, etc. In fact, when you purely love somebody, you're going to end up walking into hard and challenging conversations with them. You're going to walk through hard and challenging experiences with them. And that pure love, or in the parenting world, we call it that unconditional love. When it's unconditional, it means that it's not about the choices you want to see them make. It's about the choices they need to make for themselves, and how to have those kinds of challenging recognitions that to love somebody doesn't mean to control every aspect of their life. It means to help guide and influence them, and then ultimately accept the choices they're going to make for themselves.
Agreed.
So how does that play out when we have people in the medical field who have this idea that they know best? And it's not to say that they don't know. So I need to be clear on this. I firmly believe in the medical world. I firmly believe in the research and the data and the knowledge that we have. And yet I see so many people right now who are really very suspicious.
Yes.
Very disillusioned, very disheartened by the medical world. And I'm curious about where love comes into play here, because it seems like there's a lot of like our understanding of things that is being broken down, not by fact and data and research, but by the disconnection that's going on from the medical world to the layman world.
Well, that's one way of looking at it, and there is some of that. But I do believe that one of the worst aspects of medicine in our time is the inability to acknowledge uncertainty. And that really disses people. Can I use that word on your program?
Yeah, totally.
Disrespects people.
Yeah, it does.
So when you pretend that you're more certain than you are, you will create distrust.
Yeah.
So, as Sir John Templeton used to say to me, how little we know, how eager to learn.
Yeah.
I think that the problem that we have in medicine today, and this was rampant during the COVID epidemic, people were coming up with groundless conclusions about what to do and what not to do. Even the closing down of schools, which turned out to be very destructive for the kids socially, emotionally, intellectually, and was unnecessary because children are not affected by COVID.
Right.
And the fact that if they are, they just need a few good nights sleep and they'll be back on their feet.
Right.
So that was wrong. And it was wrong to close down the businesses. It was wrong to do a lot of things. And that vaccine, I happen to be a bit of a vaccinologist. That vaccine was overly touted. It was a magic bullet, but it wasn't.
Right.
People said this will put an end to the problem. If everybody gets this shot, and typically a follow-up or a booster, we can lick this problem. But those shots were never terribly effective.
Right.
And so a lot of people got the shot, and then they still got COVID.
Right.
And then they got the shot, and they still, people said, you'll avoid the intensive care unit. They still wound up in the intensive care unit. And then they said, well, okay, well, you know what these shots do is they prevent you from transmitting this to other people. That was complete BS.
Mm. So there was a lot. I think it's important to acknowledge.
There was nothing to the 6-foot distancing rule. That was complete gobbledygook.
Mm.
So once you start overstating your certainty, you're going to lose the public.
Okay, so I want to go to that too, and in the psychology world, a lot of this, what I have seen, is that it comes from a place of somebody needs to run the ship. Somebody needs to be certain and sure. Somebody needs to be the authority figure here, because if not, everything's going to descend into chaos and anarchy. I think that way of thinking, somebody's got to be absolutely certain here, otherwise the people are going to go mass crazy and it's going to be wild.
Totally mistaken way of thinking.
It is. However, it's something that's been baked into us as a civilization for so long. So how do we dismantle that without descending into chaos and anarchy?
Yeah, and it can be done, and it's not that difficult to do. You just have to be honest. I mean, every day in the clinical settings here, I wind up coaching people and saying to them, it's okay if you tell a patient we don't have a clear diagnosis, especially in neurology. I work a lot in neurology. Most of these cases are so-called mixed. They're Alzheimer's and they're vascular in nature, and maybe somebody hit their head in a hockey game when they were 17, so they have those kinds of issues too. You cannot predict accurately a lot of these neurological conditions.
Right.
So you're much better off to say, well, I really can't tell you. I can't give you precisely I can't use the A word, the Alzheimer's word,
Right.
but you do have a decline.
Right.
And I can assure you that we will stick with you throughout this process and we'll be here to help you come.
Mhm.
But you do not have to overuse, for example, the A word, Alzheimer's. It used to be the case that people thought that 70% of dementia in elderly adults was the result of Alzheimer's. Now it's down to 40%
Right.
at best. And even then, it's a combination of things.
Okay.
So
So, yeah.
the A word is unnecessary. You can say
Right.
it could be Alzheimer's, but we're never sure because it's only a very probable and never very certain diagnosis.
I think the thing you said there at the very tail end, the pieces, putting it all together, right? Saying, we are not sure, we are not certain, we don't know yet. Here is what we're thinking is possible.
Mhm.
And I think this is the part that most of the time our government misses, that most of the time our authority figures miss. We're going to be here to support you throughout this process. We're going to be here for you. So it's that piece that that takes away the chaos and anarchy, that even though you're feeling unsure and uncertain and you don't know where the doctors are going to go with you on XYZ, you know they're going to be there to support you. That is the distinction. That's what I was hoping you would get to, because
Yeah.
that's where I think the love comes in. The love comes in to say, I don't need to have all the answers, but I care enough that I'm going to be here, and I'm going to be here to support you
Sure.
to the best of my ability, and I'm going to make sure you have the resources and supports you need. I think when we pan out, that's what healthy love looks like. It doesn't look like, I know everything, listen to me, I'm in control, my
Arrogance.
choices are better than yours. No, it means I don't know everything, and I'm going to be here. I'm going to be here.
Yeah. And public health is horrible in this regard, I have to say. I mean,
It is.
it's one thing to be able to discuss the ethics of acknowledged uncertainty with a clinician and sometimes with patients, which I do a lot of. I think, as they say, 80% of medical knowledge is wrong.
Hmm.
And
That's a
every
scary
5
statistic.
years, it gets replaced.
Right. I try to tell people all the time, why do you think they call medicine a practice?
Yeah, exactly. So, in public health, has always had a tendency to be overly certain about things.
Yes.
And I mean, look at Germany in the 1930s.
Right.
Not just doctors, but nurses as well. They're
Mhm.
all absolutely certain
Mhm.
about racial hygienics.
Oh, yeah.
That actually got its start down the road here at one of our major genetics institutes,
Yeah.
Cold Spring Harbor. And it was just littered with anti-Semitism.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Hitler, when he wrote Mein Kampf, made a beautiful reference to Cold Spring Harbor, which is where he got a lot of his best ideas, he thought. And so then not all, but many of the physicians and many of the nurses, it wasn't just the Nazi doctors,
Right.
it was the Nazi nurses. They were really into this kind of absolute Nazism, state-sponsored public health.
Yep.
And they went ahead and they murdered people.
Yes, they did.
And so I'm not when I look at public health, I think it takes its place, it has a role, but I also think that it can be manipulated very badly.
Mm.
And I think that the best article I've ever read about public health is by Leo Alexander, who was a neurologist and a medic during World War II, who was the first one to come upon many of the death camps. And he wrote an article in the New England Journal of Medicine called Medicine Under Dictatorship. I mean, those CDC people who inflicted and perpetrated the terrible uh, uh, experience on those black men at Tuskegee,
Yep.
they felt that what they were doing was completely justified. It certainly wasn't. But they were all public health people.
Right. But which just goes to prove everything is subjective when looked at through the lens and scopes of our own personal perspectives. It's not there. Objectivity is really hard to come by. And usually, again, this is where I go back to intention, right? Because people who we now categorically think of as, we put them in the evil category, bad person category, they didn't see themselves that way. They didn't see themselves the way that we see them with hindsight and perspective.
That's true.
And it's very interesting because it brings me back to this idea of, right, where's the gap between our intention and our implementation of love. And I'm curious to bring this back to love, is that do you believe love is a skill set that can be cultivated?
I think humility is the key. I think the first and the ultimate virtue in life for every human being is humility. I don't mean humiliation, of course.
Right.
But I mean humility, to be right sized in your own consciousness, not to walk into the room and feel that you have to fill it up yourself and drive everybody away from the conversation, from the geography. I talk a lot about humility in the Pure Unlimited Love book. And it's humility that allows us to be loving. Because once we can achieve a degree of humility, and we don't have to keep deceiving ourselves and deceiving others,
right,
with these trumped up ideas about how perfect our knowledge base is, if you can just get rid of that, then you can sit at equal seating. And I'm a big believer in that. I knew a kid when I was growing up named Ray. We had a gang. I ran a gang when I was 7 years old, called the Peninsula Gang. We were not violent, but we were definitely a gang. And he could make friends, but he could never keep friends. There's a difference.
Mm-hmm.
So he would make friends, but then they would disappear. And he'd never see them again. And it's because he was always concocting, stretching the truth, and saying things about himself that were untrue. So being the gang leader, that's why I'm wearing my motorcycle jacket. I said, no, I don't ride motorcycles. I said to Ray, I said, try this. When other people speak, don't you speak for at least 20 seconds. And he started doing that. And lo and behold, he became very popular. Mm-hmm. That was a successful episode of carefrontation. I didn't get dissed or angry or irritated. I said, Ray, just don't be so strident about your opinions. And he listened to me. And he died a couple of years ago. He had a funeral outside of Boston, Massachusetts. 400 people came, many of them from our old hometown, some of them from the gang. I didn't go. Wow. And obviously what he had learned to do was to make friends, but also to keep them. And he kept them through humility. And it also takes a lot of pressure off you as an agent.
Of course.
And if I have to be always thinking, what kind of stuff about myself can I spew forth that'll make me feel a little better about life and a little better about who I am than about who you are? Right. It's a lot of work.
It is.
It's a lot of work.
So much work. It's so much work to know everything. Yeah. And I think a lot of people need to understand that if we can actually own when we don't know something,
Yes.
it gives us a lot more room to grow, to learn, to expand possibilities.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll give you this example, and then I still want you to answer the question directly of if you believe love is a skill set, because
It is.
one of the things that I experienced when my mother was going through her cancer and all the craziness, all the insanity of everything that was going on. She was on a blood thinner. They had put her on a blood thinner, and she started having a lot of issues as soon as she started it. I'm not going to get gross and graphic about it, but we kept asking her thoracic oncologist and her neuro-oncologist, could it be the Lovenox? Could it be the Lovenox? And they insisted for 4 months, oh, no, it doesn't do that. It doesn't do that. It doesn't do that. And in the meanwhile, as a result, she ended up developing all these other medical complications. And it turned out, guess what? It was the Lovenox in the end.
Yeah.
And it was really upsetting to me because her neuro-oncologist, who was a younger doctor, he finally said to me, well, I can't say with 100% certainty that it couldn't be the Lovenox. But the way he said it, and the fact that all the other doctors insisted it wasn't that, meant that she suffered for 4 months, ended up with other complications as a result, all because they were so sure, they were so certain. And that was really upsetting to us, as you can imagine.
Yeah, like a gangrenous gallbladder. I won't go into these things, but this stuff is pretty graphic, and I think you're right. We work with all the medical students at Stony Brook on this issue of not blowing up your knowledge beyond what it is. In my talks, I use the analogy to a blowfish. Have you ever seen a blowfish?
Yes.
Because you're not looking to catch a blowfish, but you've got one on your hook. And as soon as you bring it up, it just, in 2 seconds, a millisecond, it looks like a balloon.
Yeah.
And it's really an annoying thing. So I tell people, don't be a blowfish. And that helps. And I use that imagery so that they can have some insights into it and ask them to reflect on it. But I think a lot of doctors, not all of them obviously, but many of them are blowfish. They're nice people. They're nice blowfish, don't get me wrong. They're, for the most part, well-intentioned unless they do something really dastardly, which they sometimes do.
Yeah.
Like carve their initials in the abdomen of a obstetrics patient.
Oof.
These things do happen. But
I won't go touching that one right now.
Yeah. I've been involved in enough malpractice cases to kind of know my way around this world.
Yeah.
So, I think that humility is a wonderful virtue. It's not just good for other people, but it's good for you.
Yeah.
And most of these virtues are like that. Kindness, loving kindness is the same way. First chapter of my book, may you give and glow. Because when you are able to give more freely and get away from that transactional attitude about everything on earth, you get happier.
Yes.
We did a study of widows and widowers, and we asked them how they were recovering from grief and bereavement. Emphasis, they were happily married.
Okay.
Okay, just to make that point.
All of them had been happily married when they became widowed and widowed.
This is relevant to your work. So it turned out that the ones who could self-report that they were kind to others and helping others actively, whether it's at the hospital or the neighborhood park, whatever it might be, they were getting through grief and bereavement a little quicker. It's in the book.
Yeah.
And so the New York Society of Widows and Widowers got hold of this. And they called me right here in this office. Dr. Post, would you come in and give the plenary address at our annual meeting? So I went into some hotel on 7th Avenue in Manhattan. And I gave a pretty good talk about this and why I thought it was happening, that people don't have to have external transactional benefits. They can just benefit by letting go of the negative and engaging the world in a loving fashion. And it went well, but then at the end it was Q&A. And the thing you can never do is control Q&A.
No, you cannot.
Right? And so tell me how I'm doing with communication on this one.
Okay.
There's a guy in the back of the room and he's frantically waving his hand. And he just yells out, "I don't care what you say, buddy. I don't do nothing for nothing."
Very New York.
I knew I wasn't in Cleveland. And although New York people are very nice, it's just that they don't trust anyone except their friends. And we've done studies on
Right.
it. They're actually quite altruistic, but they don't like their neighbors necessarily because they don't know who the hell they are.
Well, that's a huge thing. The psychology of being a New Yorker is that you're millions of people packed into a very small locale. And as a result, in order to create buffer and not feel so inundated with the fact that there are so many others around us, we create a protective barrier. And that probably results in somebody saying, "I don't do nothing for nothing," because the attitude is, I need to protect some of my space. Right?
But they have friendship networks. So there's somebody on the other side of Central Park who's a friend. And then they can be very warm and comfortable and generous and kind and unbelievably giving. But
that makes sense.
That person down the hall, forget it.
Right. So that means then to go back to love being a skill set, which you said you do believe, you do agree with me that love is a skill set and could and any skill set, in my opinion, can be taught. Because a lot of times I think people see love as solely an emotion. Solely an emotion. In fact, I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and she said that she had heard something that somebody said there are only two emotions, love and fear. And I said, I beg to differ. Number one, we know that that's not the case in our biology, in our evolutionary psychology, and in so many aspects of our development. We know that that's not the case. And love is, in my opinion, the determinant of what the person themselves is experiencing. Love makes up the qualities of which you value the most.
Interesting. I mean, I really like what you're saying. To me, our students, we certainly did this at Case Western for many years, and we do it here. They do role playing. Mm-hmm. So to practice empathy, they have a certain kind of skill set that they need to learn. First of all, they need to learn how to listen, mm-hmm. how to ask questions, oftentimes indirectly. Right. And they need to be able to reflect back to the patient, oftentimes a simulated patient, an actor, reflect back, did I hear you right? Is this what you said? And if not, would you please say more? So you need to develop that, but that's purely a cognitive form of empathy. Right. And that's where you can learn skill sets. But I've seen students who could go through the rigmarole of cognitive empathy, and they didn't have an ounce of heart. Mm. And so there's also affective empathy. And patients not infrequently will say, that student or that doctor, they tried to understand me and it was better than nothing.
Oh.
But they didn't give me an ounce of heart. Oh. That's really well articulated in Norman Cousins' book, The Anatomy of an Illness. They didn't give me an ounce of their heart. And patients can figure that out. And do I think that's inherent and necessary for empathy at its full? Yes. So it's not just a skill set. There's also something that we have, or maybe in some cases, we don't quite have. And that's where human development comes into play. Mm. So that's where attachment theory is key. And all those things by Mary Ainsworth and Bowlby and so forth. That's all important, because if you were raised from being a toddler and even earlier
Mhm.
with a harsh, judgmental, authoritarian parent, mother or father,
Yeah.
you're probably going to be identified, and this is their book that's so important, The Strange Situation. When you're 20 years old, your friends,
Right.
if they're asked, is Jimmy warm and kind and comfortable? They're going to say no, because that early life it's not hardcore determinative. It's not a determinative thing, but there's less likelihood that your
Yes.
peers later in life will identify you as kind and generous.
I agree. It's definitely, I mean, this is a big part of what's in my book with the attachment theory and all of these pieces, but a big part of this does come from our earliest environment. However, that said, it can be changed over time because I
Yes,
firmly believe it's a skill set. It's a matter of breaking down the patterns that you habituated over time and redefining what you want it to look like. Because again, your intention might not be to be cold and
right.
not show heart, but there might be a reason why. And I see this for a lot of people who do go into the medical field. Something that I see is that they think they have to protect their heart in order to maintain, that barrier between not over caring for the patient to the point where they can't see things objectively. So there is that, but it's also because of where they were raised, right? Oh, I need to compartmentalize this. So if I can compartmentalize this, then I won't have any problems getting through it when my patient dies, when there are complications that paralyze them, when da 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 da. So they think they need to put that wall up between them and the patient, you know.
So good. So one of my old friends, Jerome Kagan, was
Yeah.
a psychologist at Harvard, child psychologist, and he wrote a book called Three Seductive Ideas. One of which was that what happens to us in those first 12 or 18 months of life is deterministic. It's not. So he makes the point, and I think he's correct, that first of all, you can get involved in an empathic community. You can go to a children's camp over the summer and learn that there's a lot of kindness in the world, and you can begin to manifest that in your life. You can go to the right school and have the right kinds of friends. You can marry the right person.
Yeah,
Um, you don't have to wait until you're 45 or 50 and have a midlife crisis.
that's true.
It's not that hardcore. Although it is the case that you're going to more likely end up on a couch in Eurona's office if you have these early life deficits. But they're not deterministic, and it's really the case that in the whole course of our lives, we're constantly navigating attachment and separation,
Yes.
and it comes and goes, and fortunately,
Yeah.
um, I've been really blessed. I've been married for 43 years, very fine person, and she doesn't scream at me. By the way, there's a book called Scream Free Parenting.
Oh,
About four
I think
years.
I've heard of that one.
It turns out that 98% of American parents fess up in these surveys that they lost it with their kids for no good reason. Does that make sense to
Yes.
you?
Yes. In fact, just and the other 2% are lying. Just
Oh,
gonna
yeah.
say that. Okay. At some point, it doesn't matter who you are, the right, or I shall say the wrong environment. You will have a bad day. You will have things going on. Things will be just everything that puts you into just the wrong climate in which you lose it.
Yeah.
every single one of us, and myself included. I
Yeah.
still work on that, and I'm an expert. I was quote unquote that. I always say, listen, I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
I'm not perfect. I'm always in learning mode. I'm always in
Always.
listening mode.
It's not
Always
about
in
perfection. It's
trying.
about getting better.
Right. And it's about being there,
Yeah.
not being perfect, but being present.
Right.
And I think that that's actually more important than anything else. It's about working towards repair, leaning in with curiosity, trying to attune yourself to the people around you, coming at it with humility, as you said, and generosity. These are learnable behaviors.
Yeah.
Where
You're
I see,
responsible. You're responsible for it.
yes.
So I get up in the morning, and this is in the beginning of Pure Unlimited Love. I
Mhm.
have a spiritual practice.
Yeah.
The only spiritual practices that I think are worthwhile are ones that somehow set you on the path over the course of the day toward more loving interactions.
Mm.
And so what I do is I get up early, usually about this morning I was up at 4, but I'm typically up at by 6 anyway. And for half an hour or sometimes even an hour, I will do a little mindfulness meditation. I will include in that envisioning the people I know I'm going to encounter over the course of the day. You know, I have iterated interactions here. I'm responsible for a lot of things, a lot of people, and I know what's going on in folks' lives. So of the 10 forms of love on my wheel of love,
Mhm.
you know, what might this person need? They could need compassion. They could need carefrontation. They could need a little help with a big creative project that means a lot to them. They could need loyalty because someone put them aside, unfortunately. They could need celebration. We always have birthday cakes out here in the hallway for everybody without exception, even people who do not have a major responsibility. You got to have respect, listening, mirth. I include mirth as an expression of love, as did Norman Cousins. But tasteful mirth, never derisive, humiliating mirth,
Right.
always the good stuff. So I'm well known around here for they're not quite dad jokes, but they're about at that level. And you have to be careful, make them appropriate, not overdo it. But question for you,
Yes.
because you're a medical professional. What do you do if you have insomnia, you are dyslectic, and you're an agnostic?
Wait, is okay, this is a dad joke, yes?
Yes. Well, not
This
really.
is a joke? Okay. Because I'm gonna go, wait, hold on.
It's medical and it's theological.
Okay. I don't know. What do you do?
You're up all night wondering about the existence of dog.
That's a good one. I like that one.
So Norman Cousins started the Norman Cousins Center at
Mhm.
UCLA, totally devoted to the study of laughter. And it's been doing that for 30 years. And they always come out every year with great things. So what you
Yes.
just did, just that moment of laughter,
Laughter.
in a
Yeah.
millisecond, it completely turns around your attitude toward the world. It's hard to
Yes,
be
yes.
morose and hate filled and ruminating if you have that kind
Yeah.
of a moment. So that's
Agreed.
why I think that mirth, that's why they talk about the laughing Buddha.
Oh yes. Yes, yes, yes.
Dostoevsky wrote the wonderful book about the idiot. The
Yeah.
Jesus-like figure
Yes.
is also an idiot, and
I will
I'm
tell you.
definitely an idiot. Nothing embarrasses me.
I will tell you something too. I met somebody at a conference I was at a couple of years ago, and she introduced laughter yoga.
Yeah,
And she's a nurse, and she's a cardiac nurse actually. And so she does the laughter yoga. And at first, and she actually had everybody doing it. And at first, of course, everybody is a little discomfited. And then all of a sudden, it's like it's this beautiful contagion. And I find that to be just like yawning is a contagion, laughter is a contagion when it's coming from a place of purity, when it's
yeah,
coming from a place of, you know, non-derisive laughter, right? The derisive laughter tends to make us feel discomforted, but I love pure laughter. And I will say this, and I think we can leave it at this, but if anybody's going through hard times, the best thing you can do is find reasons to laugh.
Well, that's what Norman Cousins did. He had an autoimmune disease and no one could really help him. So he told the hospital folks, I'm not sticking around here. He went home to his apartment in New York. He was the editor of the New York Review of Books. And he just watched reruns of Candid Camera and the Marx Brothers and all that kind of stuff. And he kind of laughed himself better. And that was the beginning of what's called officially psychoneuroimmunology. Of course, people like Esther Sternberg would come along and study it much more carefully, and there's an institute in that field at the NIH. But he just realized that if he couldn't laugh, and you go back to our culture, you asked me about the world we live in.
Yeah.
So the thing that's bothering me a lot is that people have forgotten how to laugh. They take themselves too seriously. Whatever your political view is, I don't give a damn. I'm not left, I'm not right. I'm kind of middle of the road on a lot of things. I'm a good listener. I don't judge people. And I don't have any particular fascination with any particular political figures, positive or negative. They're just human beings. But we need to laugh.
Yeah.
When you look at what goes on in Congress or even on the nightly news, if you watch it, many people don't. Nobody seems to be able to laugh anymore.
Nobody's lined up for laughter.
As a society, last. Yeah. You cannot last if you cannot laugh.
I agree. 100,000%. I will say that on each of my parents' dying journeys, we laughed quite a lot.
Yeah.
There was quite a lot of moments of absolute, just pure, unadulterated laughter and joy. And it changed the nature of the way I, moving forward in my life, perceived the experiences I had. It wasn't that it negated the pain and the suffering, that it didn't remove that, but it allowed space for laughter and joy in that process.
Absolutely.
And this is, I think, the heart of love. Love is a complex component of all these things.
Yeah. So Robin Williams had it right.
Yeah. Really
Everybody is suffering in a quiet way. You may have no idea about it whatsoever. That guy grew up in Bloomfield, north of Detroit. His dad was a big business leader in the GM world. They had a big mansion. He had no friends. It was an empty life, no siblings. And he had these huge armies of toy soldiers. And he would go through Napoleonic battles with them.
Yeah.
And that's how he learned how to do all those improvisations we picked up in Mork and Mindy. And he was not depressed, but there was an element to him that was sad. And it came out later in life. But everybody's dealing with that. And in that sense, although I don't think we have to overstate it, the Buddha was right. Suffering is ubiquitous to some degree.
Right.
Just true. Don't overdo it. And if someone's looking joyful, don't tell them, hey, stop suffering.
Right.
But you're
agreed.
Right. So you need to have mirth and joy and a little bit of laughter in life. And that's more important than people realize right now. They're too serious.
Yeah.
They're going to be the activist who changes the world. And there's something to be said for that. I have activist qualities in my own personality. But
we need to stop taking ourselves too seriously, though.
Yeah, if you don't have mirth, you're not going to be a successful activist.
Right. Because you can't balance it all. If you don't have the right kind of,
you're going to turn people off.
You know,
have a little lightness of being.
Right. You know what my mom used to say? She used to say to me, life. Nobody ever gets out of it alive.
Oh, that's true.
And the reality is, when you think about that, you could be like, oh, that's so depressing. But actually, it's quite funny, too.
Yeah,
the same
gives
people.
things in perspective.
It does. It does. It very much
All
does.
right.
Well, thank you so much for being here, for having this awesome conversation, for getting people to get a little closer to what pure, unadulterated love really looks like.
Unlimited love. Pure unlimited
Unlimited.
love.
Well, I'm going to throw every single adjective at it because it's all. But
Yeah. I don't
unlimited
go with
is,
unconditional because it's
ah,
purely at the human level.
yes.
But unlimited, again, that definition, the first thing you see when you close your eyes for the last time. We did a major study through Langone Hospital at NYU with the cardiac resuscitation department. And it was really interesting because it turns out that a lot of people who were brought back with resuscitation will say that they had this light that they saw, sort of classic near death stuff. We don't call it that. We call it remembered experience of dying because there's been so much unsophisticated research done on near death. But I think it's very important to um, to think about love as the ultimate reality in the universe, and that gets more metaphysical than anything
I
else.
like that. I like that. But I'm going to leave it on that. And I'm going to tell everybody that if you're looking for a book that will leave you with a sense of peace, I think,
Yes.
a sense of understanding, a deeper well of meaning in your life, go ahead and jump on Dr. Post's book, on Stephen's book, because it's absolutely more meaningful. And in this day and age, I know a lot of people are looking for meaning in the meaningless. So,
And it's not science in the seven paths to happiness.
right.
The word happiness has been beat around and abused so badly.
It has.
So I
Which is
use inner
sad.
peace because I think that's where we need to start.
Absolutely.
If we can
Absolutely.
get inner peace, some form of happiness, hopefully an elevated form, will follow.
Beautiful. And on that note, everybody, I'm going to
Okay.
wish you all a wonderful weekend.